Hello everyone. Happy Friday. I just realized that I don't have an external light on and it's going to start getting dark here soon. So I'm just going to prep that because you just never know. There we are. Not that bright. How is everyone? I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a great week. I still can't believe it's Friday. Next week is going to be a little bit crazy for me. If you haven't heard, I live in Italy, but I also live in the United States in the sense that I maintain my residency in the United States because I go back often and I have business dealings and all kinds of different aspects of that. So what happens when you have a residency in the United States? You can get called for jury duty. Woo! So, I got called at the end of last year for the fourth time in 10 years. For those of you that have never been called or who get called like once in a lifetime, I envy you. I don't know why they like my name. I'm a little nervous because as always, I'm nervous because if they select me for something, that means I'm stuck there. So we shall see what happens. I am very happy to do my civil service. In some ways, I'm kind of looking forward to the day when I get to retirement age because I actually would like to serve on a jury. Wait, hold on. I have that whole focus. I actually would like to serve on a jury, to be honest. I wouldn't mind. But I want to do it when I have time and I'm not stressed out that I can't actually be listening because I want to do my other stuff or I have 1,000,001 projects. So with that, it's like I'm going to be next Wednesday. I have to go to the courthouse and I will keep you all posted on what happens. So if you don't see me show up for things or if I have to cancel, now you know why, because technically I have jury duty. Let's find out how it goes. Anyways, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about see that Michelle, I can see them always wanting to dismiss you. Like I could totally see them saying, this one here, maybe not. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see. I've always been dismissed also, so we'll find out. We will find out. Anyways, today we're here to talk about, plants, of course. I actually love this work. I love coming with you and being here with you every week because I feel like there are so many interesting papers. And right now the volume of papers. So I have a few ways that I find new papers. And before I used to find maybe one every few weeks. Now it's like sometimes I find 3 in one day. It's really quite crazy. And it's an awesome type of crazy. Don't get me wrong. Hold on, I'm lowering this light because I feel like this is causing a problem. Okay. Anyway, so today's paper is another one that it's possible it's going to be technical, but if you were here and you watched last week's, you know that we sort of skipped over the parts that didn't make sense and we just extrapolated the stuff that was really good for us. And it turned out to be a really great paper for us to review. So this paper that we're going to be doing is all about how plants read their own shapes. And this is a paper that I actually came across a while back. I haven't read it in the sense that I've read maybe like the first 2 lines of it. This is a paper that came out. It's in 2016. So we're still at around that period of time. We're about at the end of all the papers that I have found to go through in 2016. I have to say, so here's my challenge. And I don't know how to solve this challenge where I have lately, like I said, I have found so many new papers, but not just papers. I have found a few really beautiful, compelling, interesting, evocative new essays as well. And I'm like torn sometimes. Like, should I do some of these essays? Should I keep with the, anyways, I have to figure out a style. I might at some point publish my list. I think I might compile my list. You'll see how long it is. And I might just publish some titles from it and see which ones you like the best, because maybe that's the best way for doing it. We'll try a democratic approach to doing this. But because I just want to make sure that we're doing things that are really exciting. Up until now, we've been jumping around. Sometimes it's art focused, sometimes it's biology focused, sometimes it's philosophically focused. And there's some amazing opportunities coming up. The other thing that I have also been debating on doing is there have been a few really cool talks. The Plant Initiative hosts some every month. There's been a few conferences that I've seen, and I've been debating whether or not I should do commentary on those. I'm going to tell you the true challenge, right? There's one of me, and there's so many things I want to bring to you, and I can't figure out whether or not it's better for me to just do more live streams. Like today, I only do one a week because we have all these other events inside of NCC. Plus, we have the podcast, right? So we have the podcast, and we have, the writing group, and today we had a book club, and we have the mentorship group. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on inside of NCC, and I can't decide whether or not it's better to do more or whether to be like, okay, you know what, we'll go once a week and it'll be fine. So if you have ideas on this, if you'd like to see me do, maybe add another stream sometime in the week that you can watch and that you can follow along as to what's happening. A lot of the creators that I follow, like on YouTube or in others, I mean, one of the creators I follow does 2 live stream and a podcast every week. And the 2 live streams are 3.5, sometimes 4 hours each, plus the podcast that she does. It's amazing. And I'm like, is that but there's thousands of people that follow her. So I'm like, maybe it's just me who's worried about overloading all of you when instead you want it. I don't know. So anyways, think about it. Have a think on this topic and let me know if you would prefer to hear more like commentary on streams. Like if you watch a conference or if you hear of a conference around these topics that's coming up and you'd like me to stream it live. So let me know. If you have other aspects, papers, or articles that you would want, let me know. And also if you prefer to hear more commentary like this more often, also let me know. It's a lot of let me know. Let me know. All right, let's jump into this paper because, time keeps on ticking. Where is it? Here it is. This is a paper. Hello? There we are. Okay, so this is a paper by New Phytologist. This came out, like I said, in 2016. It is a paper by, it looks like, scientists from the Laboratoire Reproduction et Développement des Plantes from the Université de Lyon. I don't speak. Sorry, Coco. Sorry, Korean. I used to take lessons actually with Coco, where we did more conversations in French, because my French has gone down. Well, it's gone down the toilet, to be honest, since I focus mostly on, I speak mostly Spanish and Italian all day besides English. So it's like the French has gone down, but I'd like to pick it up again. It would be really nice. Anyways, so this is, like I said, New Phytologist, 2016, Olivier Hamont and Bruno Moya. And let's just jump into it. Let's see what exactly this is about. This is how do plants read their own shapes. Now, let me explain why this is important. It's more important than you might think. Not only is this a biological argument about plants reading their own shapes, right? How do they actually do it? This is actually a discussion point on, can plants recognize themselves? And the reason why this is important is because in the current definition of consciousness, remember this is a plant consciousness commentary, the current definition of consciousness involves perception of self. Now, one of the big mistakes that has been done in the biological community is the fact that perception of self has often been tested by, can I recognize myself in a mirror? But that's because the sense of sight is the primary sense for humans. In the case of a dog, for example, maybe a dog doesn't recognize themselves in a mirror, but they can recognize their own smell. They know what their smell, because their primary sense is smell. So consciousness doesn't necessarily have to be sight. But because you know that the scientific community is a little slow, the idea of plants reading their own shape means that plants recognize themselves separately and differently than others. human or non-human, human or other kin, which is a word I like so much better. Which would mean we're one step closer to finally acknowledging consciousness. I'm going to leave that there. Okay. Some others would agree that maybe this paper doesn't go there. I don't care. I think that this is where it's going. It's not going there directly, but I think it's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to keep in mind. So let's get into it. Although the sensing of shape and deformation was historically involved in the control of animal locomotion, it is now increasingly being incorporated in developmental biology. Proprioception, don't you just love these beautiful words? Proprioception. Okay, proprioception, the perception of the self, is particularly key to the question of the reproducibility of shapes. The many regulators of growth may lead to a large array of geometries, but shape sensing restricts these diverse outputs to a limited number of forms. Mechanicalistically, and in addition to the geometrical feedback onto the diffusion of and transport of molecular factors, this is going to be one of those technical folks. I promise I'm going to describe it all. I'm going to explain all, and I'm going to explain to you a few different aspects, because again, this goes to, I know I interrupted myself mid-sentence, but trust me, there's a reason for this. One, this goes to the whole consciousness discussion about whether or not plants perceive themselves, they're in themselves, and therefore it's one of the test points of consciousness. Two, this goes to the sense of sight. Now, as you know, and we're gonna, by the way, another I Am Plant is going to be coming up soon. I'm not announcing it yet, but I'm pre-announcing it that it's going to be coming soon. My 5-day challenge to embody your plantness. And in there, remember that there's a series of activities around the expansion of the human senses, because if plants have the same senses we have, then the abilities and they have many more senses than the abilities that we as humans have, in the sense of our sense of sight, for example, is probably more extensive than what we think it is. So this helps us better understand, by understanding how plants see, both physiologically, which is what we're talking about here, and probably subtly, we can get a better understanding of what are the capabilities when I embody my plantness, of that I myself as a being of nature can also start to use and start to reawaken. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about these things, because these are some of the other pieces. The other thing that this is going to help us with is better understand the relationship between plants and other plants. We know that there's a whole number of shape-shifting plants out there, plants that literally change the entire shape of their leaves in order to better mask themselves. But is it really only to mask? Could that shape-shifting, and again, we're not going to get the details in a paper like this, but I want you to just keep your mind expansive, because we're looking to read beyond the paper. When you think about it in expansion, today we tend to, as biology tends to want to categorize the fact that plants do this whole shape-shifting as a defense mechanism, to hide, to all these things. But is that what it is? Why couldn't it be a way of relating to the other plants, right? We as humans shape shift ourselves, our personality, our characteristics, sometimes even our physical appearance, to better fit in with our overall ecosystem. Who's saying that that's not what plants are doing here too, right? These are all different things that maybe biologically speaking, we can't get to complete answers for, because they require an entirely different type of relationship. But you here are also plant communicators. I know you are, or budding plant communicators. So I want you to take a lot of these concepts and pull them out and say, well, who better to ask than the plants, right? Who better to ask than, well, don't ask Dracaena, because this Dracaena doesn't like to talk. This Dracaena likes other things. So, but who better, right, to ask than the plant directly? So this is really, and I want you to think about this in all the papers we do, this is about getting ideas and understandings of the physiology that's happening, but not to just focus there, but to extract that to what could be the thought process, what's going on in the mind and in the consciousness, and how do we get answers directly from their plant partners and our plant friends. Okay, so where was I in this sense? Let's see. Mechanistically, and in addition to geometrical feedback onto the diffusion and transport of molecular factors, we highlight the role of shape-derived mechanical stress and strain in this process. Oh, can I tell you, there's another piece of this. I know I'm probably never even going to get through the abstract at the rate I'm going. I have been reading and listening to so many different papers and scientists and molecular biologists and plant physiologists and all this. And the amount of stress our poor plant friends go through it's scary and sad. It's so scary and sad. I mean, they are really doing a lot for humanity. Kin are giving so much of not just their lives, but their livelihood in order to help humanity. I bow down to you, beautiful plants all around, and all of the kin in the world for everything that you do. Okay. Through examples at the cell, tissue, and organism scales, it appears that such mechanical feedback adds robustness to morphogenesis. Interestingly, synergies exist between shape sensing and response to external cues, such as wind and gravity. Understanding the molecular basis of proprioception proprioception is the perception of the self. Proprioception is now within reach and opens up many avenues for an integrated view of development. Okay, introductory. Let's give a brief history. This is being really weird. A brief history. It's just like jumping of proprioception. Feeling one's own shape or proprioception has very important functional implications in physiology and was first described for animal locomotion and posture control. The word proprioception was first introduced by Charles Scott Sherrington in 1906, defining muscles as stretch proprioceptors. Incidentally, proprioception also introduced the idea of feedback in biology. If the central nervous system directs motion through the activation of muscle contraction, in turn, muscles can sense a deformation and inform the cerebellum. Conversely, this means that the absence of deformation and/or movement hinders proprioception. Now, proprioception in this particular case is a word that is awareness of self, but is oftentimes connected to movement. So one of the things that is important for us to recognize here is the fact that, well, one of the many things is the fact that here there is an acknowledgement of not just movement, but also of growth at a different scale and of, what's the right word I'm looking for? I'm running out of the words that I want, right? We tend to think about movement in the sense of like what I'm doing right now, as opposed to plants we know move very slowly, but it's still thought to be deliberately, where I could be doing this for no reason other than just to do it. So the question I ask myself is like, does going down this path also help us really understand, do plants move just for the sake of movement? Question. Okay. So conversely, this means that the absence of deformation and/or movement hinders proprioception. And this can be easily tested when holding one's arm still for a long time. I can't hold my arm still for a long time. I'm Cuban, folks. I speak with my hands. And I live in Italy. We speak with our hands. And actually losing the perception of the arm. That is true. I have had that happen. Building on these observations, proprioception is now defined as the sense of the relative position of the parts of a living body. As a sense of the relative position of the parts of a living body, i.e. of its shape, as well as the strength of effort being employed in movements. The latter sometimes also coined as kinesthetics. Because growth can also be interpreted in terms of deformation and displacement, remember these things, because these are the things we have given negative definitions to words like deformation and displacement, when it's not true, because in order for me to grow, I have to deform what is currently there in order to give it a new shape. So deformation and displacement in this case is positive. The concept of proprioception has been extended to developmental biology in animals and more recently in plants. Indeed, as shown below, both the concept and the associated mechanisms, shape-dependent diffusion gradients and shape-derived mechanical stress patterns, are relevant to both phyla. All multicellular organisms exhibit reproducible shapes, suggesting that a feedback from shape to molecular input channels morphogenesis during development. Wow, there's going to be a lot of fancy words in this one. All right, let's see if we can get this. Oh, look, they put a glossary. This is awesome. They have a glossary in here. Okay, let's just keep an eye out for the words that they have in the glossary. Anisotropic. Isotropic means that a property is the same in all directions. Anisotropic means that the property differs with angular orientation. Okay, so tropic is that thing that is attracted to or pulled from, right? So magnetic tropism is being pulled by magnetic energy type of thing. Autostress, also called pre-stress, stress is at equilibrium within a structure in the absence of external mechanical load. Actually, I'm not going to read all of these because we'll read them as we come up against them. So we have anisotropic, autostress, autotropism, curvature, diffusion, mechanical stress, proprioception, which we've already read, sensing of posture, shape, and relative orientation of body parts. Strain, tensity. Okay, so these are the words we're going to keep an eye out for. The possible mechanisms behind sense shaping. Okay, sensing of multicellular geometry is indirect. Shape sensing can occur using the anisotropy. Remember, we just looked at that word. Isotropic means that a property is the same in all the directions. Anisotropic means that the property differs with angular orientation. So using anisotropy and direction of an environmental factor. Typically, sensing is external directional cues, such as gravity or light intensity gradients, modifies plant growth and architecture in a process known as tropism. So sensing of an external cue, like I said, magnetotropism, as I was talking about, or heliotropism, which is tropism of sunlight in particular, not just light tropism, which is a different type of tropism. So these are all types of tropism, which means I sense this external cue, pressure, light, when I sense sound, any of these, and then that changes something, like I react to it. That is a tropism. Here we are talking proprioception. Gosh, these words are going to kill me today. In a stricter sense, that is how a developing organism senses its own growth, independent of external directional stimuli. The most well-known and probably most basic shape-sensing mechanism in development is a generalized version of Louis Wolpert's French flag, as a morphogen is distributed in a growing organ. Its gradient not only spans more widely, but the morphogen also becomes increasingly diluted. There's a figure. Hold on. Figure 1. Where's figure 1? Is this figure 1? This is figure 1. The proprioceptive funnel channeling morphogenesis. Morphogenesis emerges from molecular factors and their interaction, as well as their impact on the mechanical state of cells and tissues. These actions can be modulated on triggered by environmental cues. So here's our environmental cues, right? We have the weather, we have different aspects, we have animals that connect. So the environmental cue, then there's a physical force and a molecular change. And all of this creates growth and putative shapes. So the shape is set by some of these environmental cues. It kind of like, and movement and stuff that happens, right? You move based on these environmental cues, and the movement is made up of something that's happening at the molecular level, but also something that's happening of physical force. Then you have this growth, and then there's feedback. I get it now. So here are the final shapes. So that's really what, although many shapes could arise from these multiple inputs, even including explosive or unstable ones, final shapes are sufficiently reproducible to be recognized by a botanist and even to define species. We argue that the sensing of shapes through Proprioceptive feedback, such as the impact of tissue geometry or molecular gradients, or the role of mechanical signals in growth, adds robustness to morphogenesis by restricting the number of possible outcomes. That makes sense, right? The idea is, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, and this is something, a factor that actually limits it. All right, let's get back into this because there's a lot here. Where did we leave off? Sorry. Figure 1. Okay. So this is a hard one. Today we ended up in a hard one. So interestingly, the mechanism is particularly relevant to plants in which the presence of plasmodesmata between contiguous cells allows the diffusion of molecular effectors across several cell files. This notably includes key transcriptor factors such as NOD1 in maize. If the effector promotes growth, such dilution thus triggers growth arrest. If the mechanism is well calibrated, this may be sufficient to generate reproducible shapes through a feedback from growth to molecular inputs in a typical proprioceptive developmental feedback. Recently, shapes-dependent diffusion was shown to be involved in the control of the stem cell number in a Arabidopsis shoot apical meristem. Because the plant hormone, blah, 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 expressed, okay, hold on, I'm going to read through this to see where we're actually going with it. Besides geometry sensing through concentration gradients, there is an increasing evidence that geometry sensing also implies the forces that derive from growth movement and shape in developing organs. The resulting mechanical, yeah, but where are we talking? Okay, so this is all about how the plant grows. I'm okay with all of this. But how do they see themselves? All right, evidence for a role of mechanical cues. Turgor pressure puts plant cell walls under high tensile stress. Indeed, wall synthesis is triggered to resist the constant weakening, thinning of the wall as a cell expands under Turgor pressure. This makes, okay. Increasingly, a cell is able to sense whether wall synthesis is sufficient to present a hazardous increase in wall stresses, notably through the integrity pathways, and thus in some ways is able to sense its own wall thickness and stiffness. Beyond wall properties, the presence of tensile stress in the cell wall also allows the cell to read its own shapes. Indeed, the pattern of tensile stress in the wall is biased by cell shape. Typically, a spherical cell under Turgor pressure would exhibit an isotropic stress pattern, whereas a cylindrical cell would exhibit an anisotropic tensile stresses in its walls. Okay, yeah, but okay, sure. Hold on a second. Sorry. Oops. I'm trying to get to what they're trying to say with all of this, because this is really, really, really technical about the way that this is going to be one of those papers we're going to jump around. Bear with me. This is all about the stresses, instructive signals to providing positional information. So mechanical cues appear as instructive signals providing positional information. This may involve cell tensegrity. Did we find the definition of tensegrity? It's up here. I think it is. There it is. Tensegrity. The organization of an auto-stress system combining isolated components in compression inside and net of elongated components in tension, cables, delineating the system spatiality. Okay, fair enough. All right, let's see where we go. So this is all the mechanics around how a plant senses who they are, like physically speaking. Oh, good. This is actually a really short paper. I didn't even realize it was this short of a paper. Okay, I want to read the conclusion because the rest is all super detailed, and I want to go to the conclusion if it stops popping up. Conclusion. Proprioception and the control of growth and form. Growth is an intrinsically unstable process if it's not controlled. This is true in meristems in which cell proliferation and expansion are exponential processes that need to be channeled to provide reproducible shapes. This is also true in older growing organs in which cell expansion and the deposition of new wall material tends to amplify and then fix any curvature. This is why a proprioceptive feedback informing the cells of the organ form is a requirement for shape robustness. Mechanical stress and strain fields seem to be central for proprioception control in parallel with diffusion transport gradients. Stress and strain are also very informative cues because there are tensorial fields that do not only convey positional information related to the shape, but also directional information. Several novel molecular players in cellular processes have started to be unraveled, some of them allowing for a scalar sensing, irrespective of orientation, and others a vectorial sensing, such as cytoskeleton. Both types of sensing may be required to drive growth and generate reproducible shapes and sizes. Although we consider proprioception in the strictest sense, that is, independent of external cues, proprioception via mechanical signals may in fact be at the crossroads between extrinsic and intrinsic perception. For instance, when excited by wind, plants undergo vibrational modes, the frequencies and patterns of which are characteristics of and only of shape. For instance, when excited by wind, plants undergo vibration modes, the frequencies and patterns of which are characteristics of and only of shape, stiffness, and weight of the plant body. Classically, thigmorphogenesis, I love thigmorphogenesis, describes how plants respond to such cues. This involves the perception of local curvatures through elastic strain sensing, but also long-distance signaling into the plant, probably involving pressure pulses traveling into the xylem. Although the sensing of static bending under mean wind load informs the plant about the interaction between the intensity of the wind and its shape and structure, the possible sensing of the frequency of the vibration modes would provide the plant with a purely proprioceptive cue for its architecture, shape, and size, allowing for the feedback control of the plant on its overall sizing. Okay, I'll get there. Such frequency mechanosensing may explain the way in which branch stems control the sizing of successive branches so as to protect themselves from the resonant breakage. This awaits the direct experiential investigation of frequency mechanosensing, which is underway in several plant species. The overall picture is still rudimentary, but it bears some similarity to animals with two types of proprioception. The first is the basic proprioception that allows for shape and growth activity control in the meristems and growth zones. Proprioceptive capacities are shared by all cells. In growing organs at latter stages, e.g. stems, roots, a second type of proprioception may involve more specialized cells and crosstalk with other sensory specialized cells, e.g. the statocytes involved in gravitropic sensing. To achieve proper posture control and shape resilience to the mechanical hazards of the outer world. In this case, not only is the robustness of morphogenesis targeted, but also the plastic acclimation of the organ shape and size to the prevailing mechanical environment through the sensing of mechanical signals. Thanks to recent developments in imaging and modeling, unraveling an underlying mechanism of proprioception and shape sensing in the plant phylum is now within reach. Okay, this is a really hard one, so I'm trying to figure out where to go with this because it's taking me a minute. It's taking me a minute to really understand the implications of what they're trying to say. Basically, what they're trying to say is they went through the whole part that we skipped, and I skipped it on purpose because really what it's doing is sharing what. Let me reiterate my general frustration that you know already, but I'm going to reiterate it for in case you're new around here and you don't know this. I have a general frustration with the fact that when we talk about plants, because the scientific world can so easily discard a plant body, it means that rather than use, and I'm not the first to say this, by the way, there's like a lot more literature coming out about this. and I was actually just listening to an older interview of Monica Galliano who talked about this too, who is like, because we can dissect, this part is mine, because we can dissect a plant, we use words that are very biological to describe the general things that plants do. Where when we talk about human beings, we will talk about what they sensed, what they felt, what they experienced, right? We talk about, I felt pressure, and therefore I reacted by opening my hand, just something like that, right? Where instead, from a plant perspective, we would call this a type of tropism, right? A physical tropism of some sort, a thingamotrophism, and then we would describe the exact biology that happens. Like when this tropism is felt, then this type of pressure is then shifted over and blah, blah, blah. Why? Because a plant can't say, I felt an animal that was hanging on my leaf, and so I moved my leaf out over so that the animal wouldn't stay there for too long. Like a plant can't tell you that, right? So we break it down to the biological respondents, and it doesn't matter how many plants I kill in order to get there. So we have this huge disconnect sometimes that's happening in the sense that we speak in a language that is very biological when we talk about otherkin, when we talk about plants especially, and other kinds of when we talk about bacteria, when we talk about certain kinds of animals, we talk in a way that is extremely biological. And this makes it hard for us to recognize the implications of this onto ourselves because we have separated ourselves out from, hold on, I'm stopping the sharing because I'm realizing that you're seeing these big words in front of you and I'm the one doing all the talking. So the reason I'm saying this is because this is a great paper to explain exactly that. I get what they're trying to say from the perspective of they're trying to break down the mechanics that allow a plant to, one, know their own shape. So a plant grows and creates a certain shape. But the shape is also influenced based on what is happening in the environment in which the plant grows, right? Similar to us as humans. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who was actually myself. I'm not even going to talk. Who are you? Sorry, a little creature just came into my house. Anyways, I believe this could be totally my imagination, but I feel like this muscle in my arm, right, is a little bit more atrophied because this is the hand that normally rests on the mouse, or while this arm is the one that moves around from the keyboard to the this, to the that, to the other thing. So what happens is when I'm doing yoga or stretching of any sort, if I put my hands like this, I feel this tight and I feel this very loose. Okay. I feel the difference between this. Now I'm telling you that like that because I'm saying I feel that this muscle is tighter. I feel a tightness and a constricting here, and I describe it all in sense of feeling. But a plant, we would describe this in the sense of very biological means, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to say before a paper like this, we would say that the plant had these characteristics, but we wouldn't think that the characteristics are a result of the environment. This is trying to say, what is the mechanism that's happening? The equivalent to this muscle has become atrophied because I'm hanging it on my mouse all day. This paper is trying to break down the biology of a plant growing and then feeling an external cue, like an environmental cue, such as wind, or maybe the plant is, or like aloe, like Jaina, the aloe plant in front of me is growing up against the wall. And so therefore the shape is changing shape. So the plant is recognizing that the current direction and shape of the growth that he should be having, there's a perception of self that says he perceives that there's a wall there, that there's a in biological terms, that there isn't a hard stimuli of some sort, whatever. But Ki recognized that there's a wall, and then as Ki grows, Ki doesn't try to continue to grow into the wall because Ki can recognize that the pressure doesn't make sense. So Ki then reverts signals in order to change the direction of growth or to stunt that particular leaf. That's really what all of this is saying. It's giving you the biological mechanisms that are happening for this, like that are going on in order to happen, for all of this to happen. And so the positive is that they're trying to understand what does it mean for a plant? How far does that sense of shaping, like how far does the plant really understand the size that Ki has, the growth that Ki has, and where and what shape that takes? Like, we don't necessarily as human beings think about when our two arms and our two legs come out, right? But at some point I recognize that I have hands and my fingers and how they are, and I make a connection between the way my body developed and the way I perceive my body. And really what this paper is just saying is that there's a whole series of biological processes that are happening in order for the plant to be able to recognize the shape that Ki has grown into, and then how to react accordingly when an environmental or an external stimulus touches that. I hope that made sense. So the paper itself, is it interesting? Sure. It's really technical. I mean, I'm like going back now and looking through it, and it's just very, very technical in a lot of perspectives, because it's all about the specialized cells and all these stuff. But what's the implication, right? Again, there is a sense of self there, right? I know that this is me and I know that I have to adjust my shape because of what is happening around me. And that's a recognition that I know who I am and I know which direction. So if you think about, for example, the image of a bristlecone pine, right? If you think about a plant that has grown in extreme conditions and extreme stress and has very much altered their shape, right? Bristlecone pines are some of the oldest beings in the world, and they survive in very harsh climate with very harsh wind by slowing down their growth and by twisting their shape. Now, probably before something like this, the thought process was that it was the wind changing the plant. In other words, the winds coming through, and that makes the shape as the plant grows different. This implies that it's the opposite way around. The plant feels the wind and makes a choice to grow in a different way. That is perception, reaction, and non sort of reflexive reaction. So it's not an automatic reaction. That's a choice. And so we're all getting to all these pieces, really touching much more the concept of, not just perception, but of awareness and awareness of self and all these different perspectives. Hopefully that made sense. I mean, seriously, there is a lot of elements here that I'm trying to glue together to make this make sense. Yeah. Okay. So we have about a little bit of time left, but I'm looking at my papers, which is funny because if you were here last week, you know that last week I queued up 3 different papers thinking that the paper that we were going on is going to be like super quick. And in the end, I ended up taking all the time on one. And today, when I only have one, because I thought we were going to take the whole time to go through it, I didn't even. I think I'm at a place where I really want to find a paper that's like for example, there's this other, hold on, let me see how long it is, because if it's not that long, I might do it. I have it here, but I think this one's long too. Yeah, no, it's long. It's like 20 pages. Dang it. Because if not, I would totally do it. It's one that I have been wanting. Oh, no, wait. Oh, I don't think I can do it in 15 minutes. Because there's a really cool paper from the Anthropocene to Mutual Thriving, an agenda for higher education in the Ecozoic. And I've been really wanting to introduce this concept of the ecozoic, because the ecozoic is starting to become this concept that we're starting to hear about more and more. And so the whole ecozoic era, right, is, hold on, let me find a good definition for you. This is this a good one? What does ecozoic mean? Hold on. I want to find a good definition because I don't just want to give you the one. The term ecozoic era was coined by Thomas Berry in a conversation with Brian Swim for their book, The Universe of Story, in order to describe the geologic era that Earth is entering when humans live in mutually enhancing relationship with Earth and the Earth community. I'm going to repeat that one. Ecozoic was coined by Thomas Berry in conversation with Brian Swim for their book, The Universe of Story, in order to describe the geologic era that Earth is entering when humans live in mutually enhancing relationships with Earth and the Earth community. I find that really interesting. So we're entering a new geologic era because the previous one, the Cenozoic, spanning of the last 65 million years, has been terminated by the Western-style industrialized human community in the late 19th, 20th, and early 21st century. While not intending to change the course of evolution or change the chemistry or larger scale cycle of the planet, we have indeed done so. We have been, as a civilization, simply paying attention to our human needs, acting out what Dr. Brian Swim calls local mind. So while many individuals in the last centuries have been aware of the effects our way of life have had on Earth community as a society, a now global civilization, we have been unable to see those effects. We have not historically been paying attention to how activities have impacted the larger community of life and those structures and systems. The evolutionary dynamics that created Earth now include the conscious and unconscious actions of the human family. And so there is a whole paper, which I'm not going to go through right now, but it's really interesting. So I'm going to pair this up with this other paper that I have that I just told you about, which is called, I'm moving it into so that I remember to do it. And I'm going to do this next week. Forced jury duty providing. There is. So I'm going to, what does this ecozoic mean? And then, oops, if we get into it, and then if we get into it, hopefully we'll have more than enough time to do that one. And which I think is funny because this is in the spring of 2010. So this is an older one. And then we can go into this paper from 2019, which is, oops, sorry, I'm trying to like make notes, which is From the Anthropocene to Mutual Thriving, the Agenda for Education and Ecozoic, in the Ecozoic. So I think that this is going to be the direction that I want to take next week. Hopefully that works for all of you too, because I feel like it's really interesting. The reason is because I think we've gone through a few papers now that have been very biological in nature, and I want to take it out from the biological to the implications of the biology that we're experiencing. So, you know, here the whole point of plant consciousness is not just to talk directly about plants always, although a lot of it is going to be about that, but it's also what are the implications as we become more aware of this part. The ecozoic is a term that we have been discussing quite frequently here in NCC because of the fact that the ecozoic is really about those mutually beneficial relationships, right? Mutually enhancing relationships with Earth and the Earth community. Although this still has a division, right? I think it could have just left when humans live in the mutually enhancing relationship that is Earth. I think that there's still, and that's part of the discussion I want to be having with you. I think we are trying, yeah, as Jill says, right, we too are understanding our emotional shapes. I'll look and see if there is a term specifically for kind of the way bristlecone pines grow when and have physical forms and stuff like that. I'll see if there's a term that has been created for that. But the point of this is that I think it's really interesting for us to go into a little bit now that we've gained more biological information, to go more in the application part and how this enhances our conversation. And I would love to have that enriching conversation around the idea of certain types of terminology and, you know, what happens as we start to reawaken our sense of I am nature, I am plants, I am all this thing. Lately, especially, I've been very I've been thrown into a much better understanding of I am even mineral, I am crystal, I am stone. So really it is the reawakening of we are nature, I am nature. And I think that that's going to be a much more interesting conversation for kind of the next short term, especially because I'm looking through what I have in my queue. And I think that this is a great place to kind of jump to, because if not, we get a little too mechanical, too biological, and we start to lose our own way in that. So hopefully that works for you. If it does, great. If not, let me know. I'm just looking. Yeah, I have also a lot of papers that are about, wow, these are going to be good ones. We're starting to get into the 2019 period of time. So this is going to be great. Oh, we're going to have an excellent few months of papers. I'm so excited. It's going to be busy. So I asked you a lot of questions at the beginning, but please write to me. Let me know what your thoughts are. Post it in NCC, and we will see each other, if all goes well with jury duty. We will see each other again next week. This is me, Tania. Bye, everyone. We'll see each other again very soon.